So, picture this. I'm 24 years old, I've got my first big girl job, and to everyone else, I seem like I'm successful. But on the inside, I am absolutely drowning. My anxiety levels are through the roof, and I can never stay focused on work long enough before the plants need water, the mail needs to be checked, I gotta order dog food, pay the credit card bill, the list goes on. The 3-page college paper that took me 5 hours to write when it took everyone else only 2 has now turned into 50+ accounts that I struggle to finish. Meanwhile, my coworkers have long past moved on. While these behaviors were present in my childhood and throughout college, they never really held me back. Now, I was aware that other people were more efficient than I was, almost as if they had more hours in the day, and this was incredibly frustrating. So I told myself that I was lazy, I needed to get it together, I needed to stay focused and be more motivated. Unfortunately, these behaviors started getting worse and worse every day. At this point, not only was my productivity at work declining, but I noticed something even more critical being affected: my mental health. And it was with each new assignment that I was given that it became harder and harder to breathe. Some of you would agree with my negative self-talk. You would think of me as full of potential, but careless, lazy, forgetful, and maybe just bad at prioritizing. And that's exactly why I'm here today. 4 months ago, I was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactive disorder with an inattentive presentation, or more commonly known as ADHD. So today, I'm here to translate the symptoms of adult ADHD and in an effort to bring awareness and compassion to those with diagnosed or undiagnosed adult ADHD. More specifically, my goal is to provide a deeper understanding of the diagnosis and how recognizing it within yourself or others could actually save a life. So before we go over these symptoms, what exactly is ADHD? ADHD is clinically characterized by inappropriate levels of inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. And actually in recent years, they have defined 3 different presentations of ADHD: inattentive, hyperactive, and combined. To gain a greater understanding of these 3 different presentations of ADHD, let's now go over the clinical symptoms and the way that they present themselves, or rather the way we're going to recognize them within ourselves or others. The first symptom I have listed here is a short attention span. A presentation of this would be shopping on Amazon or scrolling through Facebook while at work. The next is hyperactivity. A common example of this is biting or picking at your nails or lips. Next is absent-minded, and a presentation of this would be listening but not really hearing people when they're speaking. And the next symptom I have listed here is hyperfocus. A good example of this is you experience this feeling where you cannot stop reading, working, scrolling through Facebook, cleaning, playing video games, anything of that nature. And often it takes priority over eating or using the restroom, particularly for fear of losing that focus. Here we have another list of symptoms. First being procrastination. So you'll see this in a presentation where you're waiting until the last minute. You might feel like you work better under pressure. The next is forgetfulness. This is commonly seen in misplacing things, forgetting to feed your pets, or loading the dishwasher but not starting it. And next I've got impatience. So here you'll often see that you'll interrupt other people or finish other people's sentences. And the last symptom I have listed here is difficulty sustaining attention. Now you'll see this a lot where you start new projects but fail to finish them, and this can go for hobbies or routines. And a lot of times you'll see people with ADHD, they change jobs or careers frequently, or they may seem like they're just a jack of all trades. On this last slide of symptoms, we have first impulsivity. Now, this is going to be characterized or presented with trouble managing finances or difficulty sustaining relationships. And next you've got little to no executive function. And you're going to see this where people have a really hard time resisting temptation, and they're always busy doing something. And moving on to the very last symptom I have here is a skewed perception of time, and this is key to the ADHD brain. So you will frequently see those with ADHD running late, or another common one is creating long to-do lists for very short periods of time. The ADHD brain just does not perceive time in the same way that neurotypical brains do. It's important when reviewing these symptoms that you remember that all of us, ADHD or not, are going to experience some of these symptoms from time to time. The difference is that those with ADHD experience these symptoms as unrelenting, frequent, and they severely affect their work and personal lives. To put it in perspective, those with ADHD cannot choose to focus any more than those with depression can choose to be happy. Now that you know what ADHD looks like, it's important that you understand the gravity of living with this disorder, specifically because there are a lot of negative stigmas that still surround its diagnosis and treatment. For example, there's a largely held opinion that ADHD is specific to young boys with a lot of energy, and this can be due to eating too much sugar, too much screen time, or just poor parenting. However, a study done recently by the CDC has shown that there is absolutely no correlation between these. To further debunk this stigma, majority of adolescents that are diagnosed with ADHD continue to experience those symptoms in adulthood. In fact, it's estimated that 2.5% to 5% of adults have ADHD, but only 20% of them are diagnosed or being treated. These statistics are very concerning because untreated childhood or adult ADHD leads to an increased risk of behavioral, academic, and vocational problems, as well as an increased rate of incarceration, bankruptcy, substance abuse, and suicide. In fact, 40% of incarcerated men are diagnosed with ADHD. In addition, those with ADHD present lower household incomes and higher rates of unemployment. Moreover, adults with ADHD show significant comorbidities with depressive disorders, anxiety disorders, oppositional defiant disorder, personality disorder, sleep problems, and learning disabilities. For example, prior to my own diagnosis, I was being treated for anxiety and depression. Now, this is not surprising considering 1/4 of those being treated in outpatient facilities for non-ADHD related conditions are also diagnosed with ADHD. And it's interesting as well because these numbers are severely increased when the studies are focused on women. This information can be a lot to take in, but it is fundamental to understanding the way that ADHD affects adult lives. Perhaps one of the most staggering statistics is that untreated ADHD can actually reduce life expectancy by up to 13 years. While it's important to understand the weaknesses that those with ADHD share, it is also just as important to understand their strengths. ADHD is not a death sentence or a guarantee of failure. In fact, some would say that the strengths that those with ADHD have could be referred to as superpowers. The key here is just to refocus these abilities. When these abilities are refocused, impulsive becomes creative, restless and hyperactive translates to energetic, stubborn becomes persistent, and daydreamer translates to hyperfocus. Employers who support these out-of-the-box thinkers gain the greatest benefit in return in profits and creativity for their efforts. To get the most from these employees, some accommodations may need to be put in place to minimize impediments for their work, foster their productivity, and provide an environment where they can thrive. Therefore, I ask each of you to take note of what you learned today and use this information to 1. Speak up. If someone you know has come to mind today, tell them what you have learned and why you thought of them. 2. Be understanding and compassionate. Ask what you can do or do differently to make their environment ADHD friendly. make suggestions, or share what works for you to stay on task or manage your time. 3. Encourage them to talk to their doctor about their diagnosis and/or treatment. By educating someone on ADHD who you think may be suffering from its symptoms, you are giving them back their power. When I was diagnosed, I felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders, and I finally knew who I was. I learned that I wasn't lazy or unmotivated, and while I did have some significant weaknesses, I also learned that I could harness my strengths. This did not come overnight. It took trying a lot of different mechanisms and medications before I finally felt like I had both legs in the race. Less than 1 month, though, after I was diagnosed and started my treatment, I went from dead last on my team in performance to first place. This drastic shift in my performance actually led to me receiving new leadership opportunities. Since I can now stay focused and accomplish my goals, my negative self-talk has dissipated and my anxiety and depression are almost non-existent. It is in this way that I say that you can save a life. Not just someone's career or life expectancy, but their overall happiness and self-love. And there are few gifts greater than that. If this presentation resonates with you, please feel free to reach out to me. While I'm not a medical professional, I can support you as you gain the confidence you need to seek professional assistance to turn ADHD into one of your strongest attributes, just as others did for me. Thank you.